Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show. And with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He has worked for numerous independent wrestling promotions, former NWA heavyweight champion, former tag team champion. Pleased to welcome the one, the only Mustang Mike, a.k.a. Michael Beadle. Welcome, Michael, to Wrestling with Heart.
Hey, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate the invite and glad to be here.
Yes. So let's talk about your childhood. Where did you grow up?
South Louisiana, that's why you could probably tell in the accent. I got a little bit, probably not as far as south as some of the Cajuns down here, but yeah, born and raised Southern Louisiana, a town called Morgan City, probably about 30 miles crow flies from the Gulf of Mexico. So pretty deep down there.
Yeah, I mean, wrestling is huge in the South, popular, and I'm sure you grew up watching as a kid. Were you a fan?
Definitely. I see a lot of guys that do podcasts and professionals that talk about how it's um, support the business and you shouldn't be a fan and you shouldn't do this and do that. But I've been doing this 30 years and I grew up like 95% of most people who are in wrestling. I grew up a fan of professional wrestling. Of course, in my area down here was Mid-South wrestling. Sure, you've heard that. You're a way younger guy, but the days of the Junkyard Dog and the Fabulous Freebirds and Rock and Roll Express and Wrestling Number Two and all that. Those were the guys that I grew up watching and basically idolizing and hoping to meet one day. And so yeah, I definitely grew up a fan. Watching on TV the Mid South World Class Championship Wrestling out of Texas. We could catch that. Georgia Championship Wrestling out of Atlanta. So that was what I grew up watching.
Yeah, it seemed like back in the day you had so much content, on television, so much wrestling programming. You had Mid-South, you had Memphis, you had NWA, you had the WWF. So many wrestling promotions out for you to watch, and just at the fingertips, man. It's just so much content. It's so amazing to look back and think about it. So many promotions.
Yeah, and that was without the streaming that we have now. Now you have access to catch, a lot more, as far as the independence and all the different things. But yeah, man, I mean, that was nothing for a Saturday for me to be watching wrestling pretty much, 3 or 4 hours during the day in between, that and regular shows or whatever else. But I always grew up a wrestling fan and, I was fortunate enough when I met a professional wrestler when I turned 24, just really kind of by accident. And so as far as in the wrestling business, that's kind of late to get started. A lot of the guys are starting at a young age now, but I started at the age of 24 and been doing it 30 years.
What was the moment where you knew I want to break into the business? I want to get involved in the industry.
Well, I always knew because I was a fan of it. I played a lot of sports in high school, football, baseball. I got out of high school and, started kind of getting into the gym and, playing men's softball and volleyball and things. So I've always been athletic, but I always loved wrestling. And I just didn't think that was in the cards for me because back in the day, I really thought that it was WWF or WCW. That's what I thought the avenue was. And where do you go? How do you start that process? And I was just happy being a young guy running the roads, chasing women and playing sports and, all that. So it really wasn't anything that was like deep on my mind that I want to be a professional wrestler. But I always thought it would be cool if it was possible. And to give you an idea of how it started, a buddy of mine was working with a guy in Morgan City who was from Houma, Louisiana, which is about a half hour away. And just coincidental, the guy came in the shop and 6'5", 350-pound guy, and he's like, "Man, who are you?" And he's like, "Well, I'm a professional wrestler. My name's Bronco Bob." And like, wow, where do you wrestle at? It's like, well, we do independent shows, which people know now that there are independent shows out there. And they was doing shows all this time in Houma, Louisiana, 30 minutes away, and I had no idea, you know. So basically, he invited me to come to a show, and I went over there and watched the show. And after the show, I was just like, man, this is what I would love to do. And he's like, well, let's start you training to get into it. And I was like shocked, thinking, you mean I can really train to do this? And said, yeah. So I went through a training school and trained with a lot of, guys. And I was lucky enough to have the tutelage because I started at Mid South Wrestling. Had some of the tutelage, Junkyard Dog, Michael Freebird Hayes, Terry Gordy, Gentleman Chris Adams, Iceman King Parsons, Tommy Rich. I met all those guys, that was my idols, and these are guys helping me to get into the business. And so I was pretty blessed with that, to start that late and stumble across it. And here it is, 30 years later, I'm still doing it.
When you're training, and as I've talked with many people about on the show, it is no joke. They really put you through the ringer. It's intense having to do all these drills and exercises. There's like a difference between getting in shape versus in ring shape. What
Well,
was your experience like learning how to wrestle?
well, I was already somewhat athletic, but playing a lot of sports, so I had that on my side. Um, so that part I kind of was good with being able to do the flips and run the ropes and being kind of agile on my feet. But you can train all you want in the gym and run on a treadmill and on a bike and stairmaster and all and get yourself in good cardio shape. But what people don't understand is the difference between ring shape and cardio shape. And that's what I think you're getting across. It's a whole different type of deal as far as running around and then running around and getting hit by somebody or slammed by somebody. I mean, you see what the boxers go through. They're in a ring boxing, and after 3 minutes, they sitting on a stool, huffing and puffing. Well, imagine 15 minutes of that with no stop in between, and then you're not only getting hit, but you're getting slammed and getting the breath knocked out of you and all that. So it's a different monster, and I was fortunate enough that I was able to keep myself in good shape with that part of it. And I guess over time, you kind of build up a tolerance. As long as you're doing it, your body gets used to it. It's like anything else. Um, but it's amazing when I see guys that are bigger guys and they still have that type of ring shape and that type of cardio and being a larger guy. I mean, I'm 6'3", 225 pounds versus some guys are out there 300-400 pounds trying to do this.
Yeah, and everybody works differently. Everybody learns differently. Any kind of drills or exercises that you learned when you were in school that really, got you, fired up, ready to go? Any pieces of advice that you learned from your trainers that still apply to you? Let's talk about more, if you can elaborate more on your experiences in wrestling school.
Yeah, I mean, basically, like you said, it's a little different for everybody. Everybody has different capabilities and what they're capable of doing. Guys that might not be as athletic, they're going to do a slower pace thing where they try to keep things on the ground or use holds or anything like that. I'm kind of was in the middle because I was a big enough guy to where I could use my strength, but also move around enough to where I wouldn't be too slow. And of course, it all depends on the guy that you're wrestling. But Yeah, I really didn't concentrate on a lot of, the high flying things because I mean I'm 6'3", 225 pounds, not, a luchador guy, but I could still, get on the second rope and do something, do a move and come off with a leg drop, or I use a lot of my strengths. Like, my one of my key moves is a standing suplex. So I can normally, do a standing suplex and hold a guy over my head. It's roughly 220 to 230 pounds. I can hold him up for 4 or 5 seconds. So that's kind of a key move because, you kind of get the guy up and he's losing his equilibrium and slam him and stuff like that. So that's one of my moves. But um, I guess mine was a lot of basic wrestling, utilizing techniques and using my strength and height. So, like I said, I been doing it 30 years. So my wrestling savvy of different things is changed. As I've gotten older, I've realized that I might have lost a step or two. So I kind of just resort to my wisdom and move sets that I know that I'm capable of doing.
And when you're learning how to work and you're training under these legends, any pieces of advice that you got from, Michael Hayes and Terry Gordy and Junkyard Dog, anything that you still recall that they taught you that you've applied today 30 years later?
One key thing is listen. When you're in the ring, you want to soak up as much knowledge as you can when you're training, and these guys are talking to you. They're not telling you to waste their breath. They're telling you because they've been there. They've been through the process. They've got the cheat sheet on what they went through, and they're trying to get you there without having to go through the long process. So I've learned so much over time just listening and, being aware of my surroundings, respecting the guy that I'm in the ring with, because obviously, we're somewhat working together, but it's still something where you have to go out there and, perform for an audience. And depending on what type of audience you're performing in front of, I've performed in front of 2,000 people, so, your nerves can get rattled and everything. So you got to be secure in what you're doing, have a good mindset and believe in yourself. But the key to everything is listening, soaking up as much knowledge as you can by people who've been there before you. And that's what I've been able to do as of late. I've been a trainer and I've trained guys over the years and got guys ready, and they've absorbed some of the knowledge that I have. So it's kind of like continually passing on the torch to the guys that's coming behind me.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about. Let's talk about your debut. You've been in the business now 30 years. What can you tell me about some of your first few matches? Were you nervous? Were you anxious? Were you feeling confident? What can you tell me about that time?
Well, to give you a quick analogy on how my first match started, I was still in training, and we got to the building that day, and we used to train before the show, setting up the ring and doing everything you did as the new guys, you know. And we were there, and I remember like it was yesterday. It was November 19th, 1994, but I remember just like it was yesterday. They got a phone call and one of the wrestlers couldn't make it. And so they started going into a panic. Oh, who are we going to put in this match? And one of my trainers says, what about Mike? And I look over my shoulder. What Mike's in here? Like, you mean me? And he's like, yeah, I think you ready. And I'm like, so of course, automatic nerves. I'm like, now I'm not even planning for a match. You're telling me in an hour, I'm an hour and a half, you want me to get in the ring and wrestle. So I'm like, I'm not telling you no. If you have the confidence in me and think that I'm ready, he says, I'm willing to do it. But I had no ring gear. I had no wrestling name. I had nothing. So my career started on a whim. And so, matter of fact, when I reach back and tell you about the guy who started me training, his name was Bronco Bob, and he wanted to bring me in as basically, a character that was related to him, like a little brother. So my name's Mike, and I wanted to use the name Mike. So Bronco Mustang. So that's how I became Mustang Mike. And here, 30 years later, I might not be the cowboy anymore, but I'm still Mustang Mike. So make a long story short, I had a match against basically a veteran of the business that night, and pretty much with me having the nerves and all that, he took care of me pretty well. But I did good. He said I did good for my first time, and but I really remember being confident coming out the door. I had the guy Bronco with me, bringing me out there. He had his hands on my shoulder and built up my confidence. And it was a hell of a night. I mean, it was, there's certain things you remember in your life, and that's something I can never forget. So I mean, it was nervousness, but I still felt confident at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, and since then you've gone on, had a wonderful career. You've worked against so many people over the years. Who have been some of your favorite opponents that you've gotten to be in the ring with?
Well, I've fought a good many legends. Honestly, I fought with and against a couple of these guys. Greg the Hammer Valentine, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Um, let's see. I've actually been in a not in a one-on-one match, but I was in a battle royal with Terry Gordy, Michael Hayes, and Gentleman Chris Adams. I've worked together with Terry Taylor, and some of the more common names that people would probably remember from the '90s. I've had wrestling matches against Jerry Saggs from the Nasty Boys. Have a win against him. Um, I've beaten Chris Masters, the Masterpiece. Um, I've wrestled against MVP. Yep. Uh, and been in a tag team with Buff Bagwell, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, Rock and Roll Express. We did a 6-man tag. So I've had a lot of experience with a lot of the legends, and it's been a heck of a ride, and I'm still at the back end of my ride. So I've actually got some big things coming up that I'm hoping it goes my way.
Yeah, and you've had some. I'm sure you've also had some fun interactions with the legends as well. Do you have any stories you care to share?
Yeah, well, some that I can't share, but some of the things that they've told me, things that they've been through, and some I've been fortunate enough to get in the car and ride with some guys. Like just 2 years ago, Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart came in, and he actually managed me in my hometown in a big match, and just some of the stories that those guys have, I think I've done some things. These guys have done it all. I mean, when he's just talking about the road trips, going down the road with Hulk Hogan and Paul Orndorff and the Hart Foundation and all this stuff, to hear some of the things and stories that they've seen and been through, and the stuff that they've witnessed in their career, it's fun. But yeah, I mean, really, honestly, it's just the camaraderie. Some of those guys will be sitting around the locker room and just sit there and tell you certain stories of things that they've done, and things that you like, think you've done something like that. It's just weird. Not to go into detail, but I mean, like drinking stories of, you hear the stories about Andre the Giant drinking 110 beers in a setting, stuff like that. I've been in locker room not with him, but you know, Ric Flair, to give an example, Ric Flair's character was Ric Flair in real life. I mean, he lived the lifestyle of drinking and partying and doing all that stuff like that. So it's just crazy because me as a wrestler, on the independent level, the same thing that I'm doing is the same thing that these guys are doing. They just might have done it on a bigger stage, but it's the same exact thing. We put our boots on the same way, wrestle, go out and do a match. We just might not have the recognition that some of these guys have been fortunate to go to have. So um, that's a lot, means a lot when you have somebody like a Jimmy Hart or Greg Valentine or Kevin Sullivan, guys that I've shared locker rooms with, and them tell me, hey man, don't be ashamed of nothing that you're doing, because you just didn't get a break that some of the other guys got. You're just as qualified as these guys. So that means a lot.
It does. I mean, being in the ring with so many of those guys, there's nothing like it in the world. It's an amazing feeling. You're rubbing shoulders, you're networking, you're making your way and are still active, which is
Mhm.
incredible.
Yeah, I've been blessed. I mean, like I said, I mean, before anything, I should give the Lord the glory, because I mean, He's kept me in good shape, and crazy things could happen. Guys get injured all the time. You see on TV, and a freak thing happens, and a guy, twists a knee, or tears the ACL, or blows a shoulder out, or broken neck. I mean, all these things, crazy things happen, and I'm gonna knock on the desk right here, because 30 years I've never had any major injury. Um, of course, my neck hardly turns from left to right, because so many pounds and hitting the mat and landing on my head and things like that. But I've never been injured, in the wrestling ring. So, of course, I can't do this forever. I mean, 30 years is a long time of putting your body through that type of toll. Um, but I got some big things on my bucket list coming up in 2025. Um, Matter of fact, I was just awarded in February. I'm going to have a world title match for the AIWF with against
Congratulations.
Greg Anthony, and they're kind of a federation that kind of runs similar parallel with, like, say, somebody like the NWA. Old school type federation that's got their hands in a lot of territories and things and stuff like that, and so that would be quite an accomplishment. I've won the NWA North American and national title, but technically I've never had a world title. I've had the North American and the national. So a lot of regional titles, United States championships, regional belts. But this is considered a world title, and I appreciate the fact that the AIWF is, you know, granted me an opportunity, and somebody like Greg Anthony, who's a great champion, to, matter of fact, the match is going to be February 15th in my hometown of Morgan City. So he's coming from Tennessee to come wrestle me, and I appreciate that opportunity, and I'm hoping to make the most of it. So moving forward, if I do win that belt, I got some big shoes to fill right there.
Yeah, I wish you luck with that. That is an amazing opportunity, to get a title match of that magnitude. So, yeah, it's going to be great. I hope you're successful.
Yeah, I'm feeling good about it. I mean, he's coming to my hometown, the hostile territory. We've wrestled each other before. Matter of fact, we've wrestled each other 3 times, and I've beat him once. He's beat me once, and we've had a draw. So this is kind of the ultimate
The rubber
rubber
match.
ultimate rubber match. 1-1-1. So something else got to change here, and I'm hoping it changes to my favor, and I'm the new AIWF World Heavyweight Champion, and I can go out there and represent the federation, and I got a lot of fans out there. I've been blessed with that. My moniker, by the way, is Boom, so they call me Mr. Boom. I'm leader of the Boom Nation, so I got fans fortunate enough all over the South and country. I've wrestled. I've been fortunate enough to wrestle a lot of places. I've been to Vegas. I've been to, of course, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, down here on the Gulf Coast, more Mississippi, Alabama, Florida. But I've wrestled up in New York with my buddy Andrew Anderson, and New Jersey up that way. So there's some areas that I haven't got to yet. Over on the the West Coast, like California. I've been to Vegas, but not California. And then also on the East Coast, I'd like to get all the way over there to like a North Carolina, maybe up as far north as Connecticut area. So I know it'll open up some doors if I can get that world title, because that's everybody wants you then if you're the world champion.
Mm-hmm. Now let's switch gears and talk about some of the stuff you've done outside of the business. I know you've been involved with a lot of charity work, done some stuff in your community. What kinds of things have you done to help out over the years?
Well, a lot of schools, people come to me all the time, and they'll call me and they says, Mike, how can we get wrestling to our town, and not only to our town, to help out the community? I'm big on that. I know that it's very important. People need help sometime, and they're looking for a way to better do it. You can do bake sales, and you can do raffles, and you can do car washes and all that. But it's kind of like a wrestling show is kind of a performance that people are getting their money's worth to come see, and it's helping somebody at the same time. So, multiple schools all over South Louisiana. Probably, if I'd have to go back and count and just say and put a number on it, I'd say I've done at least 12 different schools in Louisiana where we've done fundraisers and went in there and helped them raise money for their programs and athletic programs or beta clubs or whatever it might be, and multiple times. Um, we'll also do every year. This is our seventh year that just passed. We do a fundraiser for Toys for Tots for the kids for the area that's not fortunate enough where their parents can't buy them toys. I go out to all the local businesses in town and get them to, make a donation to help, toward buying toys. And the last several years, we've been able to raise over $2,000 in toys each time. That's normally the number I shoot for is about $2,000, and that can help a lot of kids. Whether it's bikes or scooters or, they don't, a kid that is in need wants anything. He'll take a football or a baby doll or whatever. But if you can get a scooter or a bike or a little Nintendo handset or something like that, or whatever the case may be, those things that are $60, $70, that's big for a kid. So we've been lucky enough and been able to do that. I've helped out, you know, benevolent societies for like the police departments and, the VFWs, the veterans and things like that. So, people call me all the time and they ask it for help. And I always want to try to do everything that I can to help.
Yeah. That's what it's about, paying it forward, making someone's day, because you just never know what somebody's going through in their life. What is it about giving back to your community that gives you the most joy?
Well, there's nothing that you can beat to see the look on a kid's face when he's happy. I mean, if you haven't had that luxury to be able to do that, what I do as a wrestler and just that feeling of being out there, being at a show and a kid will come up to me and shake my hand and look at me like I'm larger than life, like the look that I had if I would have met like, you know, Junkyard Dog or one of those guys. But I remember what that feeling was like for me. But a kid that's 7 or 8 years old and he watches wrestling on TV, and he comes up to you and says, "I used to love Roman Reigns, but now you my favorite." I mean, how can you imagine what that feels like for that kid to say that? And that's one thing that's brutal about kids. They're sincere. They'll tell you how they feel. And that's like, wow. I said that. So it kind of chokes me up just thinking about that feeling. So that's one thing what I do at a show. So if I know that I can go out and help my own community or neighboring communities and help kids that might not even be in the wrestling, but they just need help, it's just a good feeling to know that you're bringing joy to somebody.
It is. And you mentioned this earlier, you also have trained wrestlers as well. Tell me about how you got involved with that.
Yeah, well, it's just passing on the knowledge. And I started with Mid South Wrestling in 1994, and in 1997, another fellow wrestler, a friend of mine, wanted to start up his own company, which was called Gulf Coast Wrestling. And basically, I just kind of came in and was kind of helping him, do things and kind of help with the promotion side, still wrestle. And then I guess maybe 10 years or so passed. I had probably about 13 years under my belt. And guys would come at the show and they'd talk to me after the show and like, "Hey, I'd like to get involved in this. How can I do it?" And I'm like, well, I mean, at that point, I didn't have a school. I just said, well, I mean, I wouldn't mind if you're really interested in it, showing you some things and this and that, whatever. So it was just fortunate enough that my partner at the time, we had bought a ring and he had a big shed in his backyard, so was able to set it up in between shows. And it started like that. Hey, look, I'm not the WCW power plant. I'm not, WWE Performance Center, but I can pass on the knowledge that I have. and guys started coming, and I started teaching them. And then, of course, I would bring in other guys who had experience even more than me, and come in and let them kind of work together and teach them as we go along. And then, there's a lot of guys out there that's doing really good things right now in the independent circuit that I've helped, you know, bring along and pass my knowledge to. And that's a sense of pride too, to know that not only what I've done, but I'm helping, keep the torch going, and have guys that's, basically underneath me, where they're proud to say, hey, I was trained by Mustang Mike, or whatever the case may be. And so that's kind of how it goes along. And training people probably over the years, I'd say in last 15 years, I've probably personally trained maybe 20, 25 guys and tutored another 20, 25. So there's a lot of guys out there that I've got a little bit of my stamp on.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about passing on the knowledge. What are some things that you have told your students?
Well, like I said, the same thing that I was told, to always listen, to always keep your ears open, to absorb everything you get. You get some of these guys who when you get, say, a legend that comes to the show, and they're talking and they're kind of teaching kind of some of the wisdom that they have on, uh, technical stuff, how to get the crowd involved in a match, how to, you know to let everything absorb when you do a move. Don't just go right into the next move. Let the crowd kind of feel it and absorb it, the way you bring the crowd into the match with you. The guys, if you've seen over the years, that have been super successful are guys that connect with the crowd in one way or the other. You've had, let's just say, the example, you know, when The Rock was wrestling and he was at his highest, he wasn't even wrestling as much as he was talking on the microphone, because they had whatever he was saying on the tip of his tongue. They was waiting for what he had to say. So he was able to bring the crowd into that moment with him, where they wanted to see something.
It's crowd
And
involvement.
yes, and that's the thing. You have so many guys out there that's super talented, but they don't know how to connect with the crowd. And like I said, whatever you're doing, you need to be the best bad guy or the best good guy. If you're in between and you're just sitting there and the crowd's like, okay, well, he's good, but there's something about him that I just don't connect with, and they go and get a hot dog or a hamburger while you're wrestling, those are the guys who um, just is not going to be as successful, because there's a million guys out there that's got athletic ability, but you really have to have it all. You have to have athletic ability, you have to have the smarts in your head, you have to be able to talk on the microphone, and you have to be able to connect with the crowd. So that's a lot of the things that I'm try to teach, that it's not all about one thing, about just being the best wrestler. You need to have a complete set.
Yeah, it's the total package.
It really is. I mean, like I said, it's that's what ultimately. I mean, you can have, there's guys in the business right now that's in the big spotlights right now that probably don't too, because they knew the right person. It's just, that's life. I mean, you can get a promotion in a company, and be running a company because your dad owns the company. That's all possible in any job that you get involved in. But really, you know, to be successful, I think you have a way better chance at having the complete package and being able to go out there and be noticed, have the right character, build your character up to where it's going to be something different, and not just something the next guy that's doing the same thing did before you. Um, be personable with the crowd, and you know, I've been fortunate enough to have a little bit of all of that, and it's just because things that I've learned and taught and kept my ears open over the year. I'm constantly taking advice, because you can never stop learning. You know.
No, no, it's never too late. Now you've been involved in wrestling now 30 years. Where do you see yourself heading? Do you still see yourself in the ring? Do you see yourself backstage or in a training capacity? Where do you see yourself heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, for sure, I see myself. I'm never going to be that guy to where I feel like, okay, my back's hurting too bad or my neck's hurting too bad, and I have to go into a match knowing that I'm not capable, or at I'm never going to be 100% anymore, because of them. 30 years of doing this. But as long as I'm 85%, 90%, and I feel like I'm performing, I don't put a time limit on how long I think I'm going to be in ring. Just for sure, I take it year by year from now, because 5 years ago, people were like, when are you going to retire? Oh, one more year, then one more year, then one more year. So I'm always saying one more year, but I'm not, you know, uh, kind of wild enough to be able to say, okay, another 5 years, I'll still be doing this. So I just know that when it gets to that time, that it's time for me to say, okay, I need to walk away from the in-ring competition. I still can be there as a tutor or a manager or a trainer. I do my own promotion down here in Louisiana called Gulf State Wrestling. So anybody wants to look that up, look up Gulf State Wrestling. We have a sister company, Pro Wrestling 225. We kind of cover a lot of South Louisiana. Between the two federations, we do about probably 22 to 25 shows a year. So, and then you can go on YouTube and you can find a lot of stuff if you Google Mustang Mike or Pro Wrestling 225 or Gulf State Wrestling. So there's a lot of information to find on what I'm doing that way. But no matter what, I can't see myself walking away from it. I know that I'll still be involved in some sort of way, whether it's management, promoting, training, tutoring guys and passing on the knowledge, even if I'm not, wrestling. So I just know that next year is a big year because if that world title comes through, I'm going to spend the extra time in the gym and the extra time stretching and going to the chiropractor and doing all the things to keep the machine rolling. And then, like I said, we'll just maybe next year at this time we might be having a different conversation. But as of right now, I'm still going strong.
I like to hear that. I love to hear that. Well, this has been wonderful getting the chance to speak with you. I want to say thank you for coming on to the show. It means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. You just plugged your wrestling promotion, but just in case people didn't get it, where can people find more about you and about the school and about your promotion on social media? So people want to go check it out. Feel free to do so.
Yeah, definitely. My personal Facebook is Mustang Mike. You can go on there. Also that's Facebook. On Instagram, it's Mustang Mike Boom. That's my Instagram handle. And then also on Facebook, Gulf State Wrestling, GULF State Wrestling. And then my sister promotion is Pro Wrestling 225. So that's the main areas where you can find a lot of stuff. Of course, if you go on YouTube, you can look up Mustang Mike. Just put that in the search bar, Mustang Mike Wrestler, because there's actually a Mustang Mike that deals a lot with cars, and I'm not a car guy. So, but a lot of my stuff will pop up, and then, like I said, but if people are out there and they, want to join the Boom Nation, look up Mustang Mike, hit me up on my fan page. And look up Gulf State Wrestling. Follow. We always putting our flyers and our matches and our match results out there. So we appreciate you with giving us the platform to put us out there. And anybody out there that's wanting to become a professional wrestler, hey, if that's something you want to do, pursue it. Just be smart. Know what your body's capable of, and whoever's training you, just listen, absorb all that knowledge.
All right. Well, thanks again, Mike, and you're more than welcome to come back.
All right. Appreciate it. Boom.
All right. Take care. This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.